guys, so today I'm going to be showing you a recipe that I actually just made a couple hours ago for something called gaufres liégeoises, or Belgian waffles. And I'm going to be doing this recipe to basically talk about unit conversion. So I'm going to be starting with a French recipe, and I'm going to be converting the units into units that I can use. So I'm going to cut back to last night when I started making that. So this is where what I was saying about unit conversions comes in, because I have the recipe with all the ingredients that I need to make my waffles. But the problem is I don't have any ways to measure out the amounts. So we have something that's in grams here, some flour is measured in grams, some milk is measured in centiliters. There are a few things I already know, like 2 eggs, that's pretty simple, 1 pinch of salt. I know how to do that too. But let's talk about how we can turn these measurements, these ones that I don't know how to measure, into ones that I do know how to measure. To talk about that, we're going to need this sheet that I made up with conversions. So all of these conversions here are going to help us go from something called metric units, which is what is used in France and many other parts of the world, to units that we're more familiar with. So for instance, this first one here, we go from grams to ounces. So that's going from a measure of mass, or you can kind of think about that like weight, in France to in the US. This second one, it's going from centiliters to cups. So that's centiliters is a way of measuring volume, and we're switching that into another way of measuring volume. These next two are a little bit different because we are switching from measuring something by mass to measuring by volume. And I've just done that to make it a little bit easier. But those are sort of specific for particular ingredients. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these conversions to help me turn this recipe here into an American recipe. Now, I'm only going to do one of the conversions on camera, but I want you to pause after I do it, and you guys can try to do the rest using this conversion sheet. So the one conversion that I did is this one right here, when I'm trying to convert the flour here into ounces instead of grams. So we see here that 100 grams is equal to 3.53 ounces, but we have 375 grams. So what we're going to do is we are going to multiply 3.53, so that's how many ounces are in 100 grams, by 375 over 100. So that's how many times 100 grams we have of flour in this recipe. Now 375 over 100 can simplify to the decimal 3.75. So then you're left with the admittedly somewhat difficult long multiplication problem of 3.53 times 3.75. When I did that out, that gets to be 13.24 ounces approximately. The other problem is that that's very specific, and I'm not going to be able to measure something that exact. And so in my final recipe, I have it just as, you can see here, 13 ounces. Now, I'm not going to show you the rest of the final recipe quite yet. Why don't you guys pause the video here and try to do all the rest of the conversions on your own. All right, here is the final recipe. So these are going to be the proportions that I'm going to use. Some of these are written in decimals, and I might kind of round up or down a bit to make it easier, but these are the amounts that I'm going to use for my recipe. All right, first I'm going to measure out 13 ounces of flour using my scale. So I'm just gonna put flour into the scale until it reaches 13 ounces. All set. So I just put my flour in a bowl, and to this bowl I'm going to add my pinch of salt and then also just a little bit of sugar. Pinch of salt and just a bit of sugar. So I just created a, quote, fountain with the flour and salt and sugar mixture, and now I'm going to be cracking 2 eggs right into that little dip in the middle, hopefully not getting any eggshells in there. That's one. And two. Perfect. Oh no, fell out of the fountain. That's okay. So I just put my flour mixture to the side. You can see it over there a little bit. And now I have to measure out 0.9 cups of milk. Then I have to heat that up and add 0.6 tablespoons of yeast. So let's start with the milk. And I don't have a marking on my measuring cup for 0.9 cups. But basically I know that that means just a bit less than 1 cup. I'm gonna add it kind of slowly. And I'm gonna stop it probably right about there. That seems like a good place to stop. Now I gotta go warm that up in the microwave just a little bit. My milk is now warmed up, and so I'm going to add 0.6 tablespoons of yeast, which you can see here, it looks like a little bit more than half of a tablespoon. Again, I'm estimating a little bit, but that's okay. Add that to my milk. Boop. I'm back with my flour mixture, so I'm gonna basically take my milk and yeast mixture from earlier, put it in with the flour and egg, and mix it all together. So I'm left with this kind of doughy licking thing, and I have to leave this to rest to let it rise a bit. I am back about 30 minutes later, a little bit more, with my dough that has risen a little bit, so that's great. I have to add now my last 3 ingredients. So 10.5 teaspoons of butter, which is going to be equivalent, as you can see, each stick of butter has 8 tablespoons. So that's going to be equivalent to a whole stick of butter plus an extra 2.5 tablespoons. And then I'm going to melt that. So I've got my melted butter. I'm going to add that in with the rest of my dough. And then I'm also going to add in my vanilla, 1 teaspoon. There we go. And last step is my pearl sugar. I had to especially order this actually. It's called Swedish pearl sugar, and it's really, really, really big grains of sugar. I don't know if you can see inside. But basically I'm gonna measure it on the scale the same way that I did with my flour. Scale right there, and I'm just gonna pour in my pearl sugar until we get to 3.53 ounces. Or, you know, whatever, between 3 and 4 ounces. I'm not gonna be able to get it super, super exact. All right, 2 ounces, 3 ounces, 3.5. That was perfect. Now I'm gonna add that in my bowl with everything else. Last step is to stir this all together. All right, my dough is all mixed together again with the sugar and butter and vanilla added. So I'm gonna, again, let this sit for at least 30 minutes. I'm actually going to leave it overnight in the fridge, and then I'm gonna make these waffles in the morning. Okay, it's the next morning, which means it is waffle time. So I'm gonna stick these on the waffle iron, and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. First batch of waffles is in the waffle cooker. Let's see how it turns out. The waffles ended up tasting really good, which I was really happy about. Obviously, I'll put the recipe down below if you want to check it out, and I hope you enjoyed this video.